You're getting poorer while you sleep, and the worst part is you already know it. You have never been broke because you had no money. You have been broke because of money you believed was already yours. Think about that for a second. The bonus that was coming, the raise that was promised, the deal that was almost closed. You spent it in your mind before it ever touched your hand. You made decisions based on it. You built a version of your life around it. And when it did not arrive, it was not just a financial loss. It was the collapse of an entire reality that you had constructed in your head. If we look at this happening to people who earned six-figure salaries and still couldn't sleep at night, it wasn't because they were irresponsible, but because they lived in a financial future that existed only in their imagination. Epictetus wrote about this in the Discourses of Epictetus, Book 1, Chapter 1. He said that men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things. The money you imagined having was an opinion, a projection, a story your mind told you about the future, and you believed it so completely that you mortgaged your present peace against it. Here is what no financial advisor will ever tell you. The most dangerous number in your bank account is not the one you see on the screen. It is the one you see when you close your eyes. The imagined balance, the expected income, the anticipated windfall. That number lives rent-free in your psychology, and it is costing you everything. Look at the people around you. The ones who earn well and still feel perpetually behind. The ones who got the promotion and somehow ended up more anxious than before. The ones who hit a financial goal and felt nothing but the immediate pressure of the next one. This is not a discipline problem. This is not an income problem. This is what happens when a person builds their entire financial identity around money that does not yet exist, and perhaps never will. The Stoics called this the discipline of desire, not the suppression of ambition, but the radical act of wanting only what is real, only what is present, only what is actually in your hands right now. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 2, Paragraph 1, that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Most people read that as motivation. We can interpret this as a financial strategy, because a mind anchored in reality makes better decisions than a mind that is perpetually chasing what is imagined. When you stop building your identity around money you do not yet have, something extraordinary happens. You stop making fear-based decisions. You stop overextending. You stop performing a version of wealth that is exhausting to maintain. You start operating from what is real. And what is real is always more stable than what is imagined. The trap is not greed. The trap is anticipation. The trap is the quiet, socially acceptable habit of mentally spending tomorrow's money today. Every time you do that, you are not planning. You are gambling with your own psychology. You are placing your peace of mind as collateral against an outcome you cannot control. So, I want to ask you something, and he wants you to reflect on it before answering. How much of your current financial stress is due to money you don't actually have, compared to the money you expected to have and didn't receive? This distinction is crucial, because one of these problems is financial. The other is philosophical, and only one of them can be solved by earning more. I want you to imagine the richest person you know personally, not the richest person you've seen on social media, not the celebrity with the private jet and sponsored lifestyle. The richest person you've ever sat at a dinner table with, worked with, or spent childhood with. Now ask yourself, how did you know they were rich? What was the clue? Because bet everything you have that the truly wealthy people in your life weren't the most extravagant. There is a psychology behind the display of wealth that nobody talks about honestly. When a person genuinely has financial security, they feel no pressure to announce it. The announcement itself is the symptom. The luxury watch worn to a casual lunch. The car that costs more than most people's annual salary parked where everyone will see it. The vacation posted before the flight even lands. These are not expressions of abundance. They are cries for validation from people who have confused net worth with self-worth. And that confusion is one of the most expensive psychological mistakes a human being can make. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 6, Paragraph 16, that everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. The image of wealth that dominates your screen every single day is not the truth of wealth. It is a performance of wealth. And performances are exhausting, unsustainable, and hollow at their core. Look at what that performance actually costs. Every dollar spent on signaling wealth to others is a dollar that does not compound. It does not grow. It does not protect you when the market shifts or the job disappears or the health crisis arrives without warning. The invisible wealth, the savings nobody knows about, the investments nobody applauds, the financial discipline that happens in private, that is the wealth that actually functions when life tests you. And life will test you. That part is not a possibility. It is a certainty. Seneca addressed this directly in Letters to Lucilius. Letter 5. He wrote that it is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the man who hankers after more. The person performing wealth on a platform of debt is not rich. They are in a particularly sophisticated form of poverty, one that comes with a good filter and a comment section full of people who believe the performance. Here is the psychological mechanism that makes this so destructive. The dopamine hit from social validation is real, but it is brief, and every time you chase it with a purchase, with a post, with a display designed to communicate a status you are working to maintain, rather than a security you actually possess, you are training your brain to need more of it next time. The cycle does not plateau. It escalates, and the financial damage escalates with it. The truly wealthy people we observe share a defining characteristic. It's impossible to impress them with material possessions. A new car doesn't move them. A designer label doesn't catch their eye. The number of followers on social media means nothing to them as a measure of a person's worth. This is because they have already done the inner work of separating their identity from their possessions. They have achieved what the Stoics considered the highest form of financial intelligence, the freedom of not needing external confirmation that they are prospering. The question is this: who are you buying things for? When you make a purchase that exceeds your budget, when you choose the most expensive option, not because it serves you better, but because of its appearance, who is the audience? Because if the audience is other people, then you are not building wealth, you are renting approval. And approval, unlike a good investment, never gives you a return. Before proceeding with this section, I need you to understand something. The dissatisfaction you feel regarding your financial life is not a personal failing. It is not a character flaw. It is not proof that you are ungrateful, undisciplined, or incapable of being content. It was deliberately, systematically, and at enormous cost instilled in you by people who profit directly from your constant feeling of not having enough. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a business model. The average American adult is exposed to somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 advertisements every single day. Every single one of those messages is engineered around a single psychological premise: that your current life is insufficient, that the version of you without this product, this service, this experience, this upgrade, is a lesser version. That satisfaction is always one purchase away. The entire architecture of modern consumer culture is built on manufacturing a hunger that can never be fully fed, because a satisfied customer is a customer who stops buying. Seneca wrote in Letters to Lucilius, letter 16, that if you want to make a man happy, add not to his possessions but take away from his desires. That line was written nearly 2,000 years ago, and it has never been more relevant than it is right now, in this exact moment in history, when the machinery of desire has never been more sophisticated, more targeted, or more relentless. The algorithms that govern what you see, what you want, and what you believe you need are not neutral tools. They are precision instruments designed to locate the exact point of your insecurity and press on it repeatedly until you open your wallet. Here is what that machinery actually does to your brain. Neuroscience has confirmed what the Stoics understood philosophically. The anticipation of acquiring something activates the dopamine system more powerfully than the acquisition itself. The wanting feels better than the having, which means the moment you get the thing you convinced yourself you needed, the satisfaction is brief, almost anticlimactic, and then the system resets and points you toward the next thing. You are not weak for experiencing this, you are human. But understanding the mechanism is what separates the person who is controlled by it from the person who controls it. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 9, Paragraph 9, that if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. There is a version of that principle that applies directly to desire. If it is not yours, do not want it. And by yours, I'm not referring to something legal. It refers to something authentic. It refers to the desire that arises from your own values, your own vision of a good life, your own definition of sufficiency, not the desire that was implanted in you by an algorithm that knows your browsing history better than you know your own motivations. The Stoic practice that addresses this most directly is called negative visualization. Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and Seneca all practiced it in different forms. The discipline of imagining life without the things you currently have, not to create anxiety, but to create genuine appreciation for what already exists. When you sit with that practice honestly, the hunger for more begins to quiet, not because you have suppressed it, but because you have exposed it for what it is. A manufactured appetite, a feeling created by external forces and mistaken for an internal truth. The next time you feel the urge to make an unplanned purchase, the next time you feel that familiar urgency to acquire something, ask yourself this question: would I want this if no one ever knew I had it? Not as a rule, not as a prohibition, just as information. Because the answer to that question will tell you more about your real desires versus your manufactured desires than any budgeting system ever could. Your enough already exists. It existed before the advertisements told you it did not. The work is not to earn your way to satisfaction. The work is to reclaim the satisfaction that was taken from you before you were old enough to defend it. I'm going to say something that most people in this field would never say out loud. The reason most people face financial difficulties has nothing to do with how much they earn. It has everything to do with the psychological state from which they make every financial decision in their lives. And that state, for the vast majority of people, is fear. Not calculated caution, not healthy prudence, raw, unexamined, chronic fear. The kind that runs quietly in the background of every money conversation, every price tag, every bank statement, every dinner where someone suggests splitting the bill and you feel that familiar tightening in your chest before you even look at the number. This fear isn't protecting you. This fear is leading you to ruin. And I'm going to show you exactly how. When the human brain operates in a state of scarcity, it does not become more resourceful. It becomes more narrow. This is not a metaphor. It is neuroscience. Researchers at Princeton University and Harvard conducted a landmark study published in the journal Science in 2013, demonstrating that the cognitive burden of financial worry consumes the same mental bandwidth as losing an entire night of sleep. Every single day, people operating under chronic financial anxiety are making decisions with a brain that is functionally impaired. They take worse risks. They miss better opportunities. They make short-term choices that create long-term damage. Not because they are foolish, because their mind is spending its most valuable resources managing terror instead of creating solutions. Epictetus wrote in the Discourses of Epictetus, Book 2, Chapter 1, that wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Wealth also consists of having a mind free from fear, enough to see the opportunities that are already around you. Because fear not only drains your energy but also distorts your perception. A person who acts out of financial fear sees the world through a lens of threats. Every risk seems catastrophic. Every opportunity seems like a trap. Every successful person seems lucky or dishonest, because acknowledging their success would require admitting that other choices were possible, and that acknowledgement is too painful to bear. Look at the pattern in the people around you who have been stuck financially for years. Not the ones who lack intelligence, not the ones who lack opportunity, the ones who are paralyzed, the ones who talk about what they are going to do but never move, the ones who research endlessly and decide nothing. The ones who start and stop and start and stop until the window closes and they tell themselves it was never the right time. That is not laziness. That is fear wearing the costume of caution. And it is one of the most socially acceptable forms of self-sabotage that exists. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 5, Paragraph 8, that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Before you can exert power over your mind, You need to be honest about what it's really doing. Most people who act out of financial fear have never named it. They disguise it as practicality. They call it realism. They confuse their anxiety with wisdom and their procrastination with strategy. And this mistaken identification is the most costly mistake they will ever make. The Stoic remedy is not positive thinking. The Stoics had no patience for the kind of forced optimism that pretends difficulty does not exist. The remedy is something far more powerful and far more difficult. It is the honest, unflinching examination of what is actually in your control and what is not, followed by the radical decision to invest your emotional energy exclusively in the former. Seneca wrote in Letters to Lucilius, letter 98, that the fool with all his other faults has this also: he is always getting ready to live. The person paralyzed by financial fear is always getting ready to start, always waiting until the fear subsides before making the move. But the fear does not subside on its own. It subsides when you move through it. I want you to identify a financial decision you've been avoiding out of fear, not because it's a bad decision, but because it's frightening. The fear you feel about this decision doesn't mean it's wrong, but rather that something important is at stake. And important things are always worth the discomfort of facing them head on. I want to start this with a story about two people who lost everything on the same day. Both of them had built their financial lives around the same industry. Both of them had families, mortgages, retirement accounts, and plans that extended decades into the future. On a Tuesday morning in October, the company they both worked for filed for bankruptcy. By noon, everything they had built their financial identities around was gone. Same circumstance, same loss, same Tuesday. What happened next was so different between the two of them that it changes the way you think about financial security permanently. The first person collapsed. Not dramatically, not in a way that was visible to the people around them immediately, but internally, they folded. Because everything they had invested in was external. Their confidence lived in their title. Their sense of security lived in their salary. Their belief in their own competence lived in the structure of an institution that no longer existed. Without those external anchors, they had no internal ones to hold them. They spent the next 2 years making increasingly desperate financial decisions, chasing the stability they had lost by reaching for things outside themselves and losing more ground with every reach. The second person took a walk alone for 45 minutes and came back with a list. Not a list of grievances. A list of what they actually knew how to do, what they had built inside themselves over 20 years that no bankruptcy filing could touch. Their skills, their relationships built on genuine respect rather than professional utility, their capacity to think clearly under pressure, their understanding of an industry that still existed even if that particular company did not. Within 8 months, they had rebuilt, not to the same place, to a better one. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 4, paragraph 3, that very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. We look at this in a financial context and realize something that most investment strategies completely ignore. The ultimate asset class has never had a bad decade. The ultimate portfolio has never been affected by a market crash, inflation, a geopolitical event, or a corporate bankruptcy. That asset class is you. More specifically, the version of you that was deliberately, intentionally built with the same rigor that serious investors apply to their financial portfolios. Here's what I mean concretely by that. The world is genuinely unpredictable. Anyone who says otherwise is either naive or trying to sell something. Markets move in ways that baffle experts. Industries that seemed permanent disappear in a single technological cycle. Jobs that didn't exist 10 years ago are now essential, and jobs that seemed essential 10 years ago are now obsolete. The people who successfully navigate this unpredictability are not those who correctly predicted it. They are those who have become adaptable enough to respond to any eventuality. Epictetus wrote in The Discourses of Epictetus, Book 1, Chapter 2, that men are disturbed not by things, but by their opinions about things. The person who has invested deeply in themselves has an opinion about difficulty that is fundamentally different from the person who has invested only in external structures. They see disruption not as destruction, but as redirection, They see loss not as an ending, but as a clearing. That is not a positive thinking trick. That is the natural psychological consequence of knowing, at a deep and unshakable level, that the most important thing you have cannot be taken from you. Look at the people in your own life who have weathered genuine financial devastation and come back stronger. Not luckier, stronger. The common thread is never the size of their savings account before the crisis hit. It is always the depth of what they had built inside themselves before the crisis arrived. The quality of their thinking, the resilience of their character, the authenticity of the relationships they had cultivated, the skills that belonged to them and not to any institution. Those things survived the crash. Everything else was rebuilt from them. Seneca wrote in Letters to Lucilius, letter 77, that it is not that I am brave, but that I know what is worth fearing. What is worth fearing is not the market correction, or the job loss, or the unexpected expense. Those are painful, but they are survivable by any person who is invested in their own capacity to respond to them. What is worth fearing is arriving at a moment of real crisis and discovering that everything you counted on was outside yourself, and that inside yourself there is nothing you built, nothing you strengthened, nothing that was ever truly yours. The single most financially protective decision you can make today has nothing to do with your portfolio allocation or your savings rate or your tax strategy. It is the decision to become someone whose value is intrinsic, someone whose competence, character, and clarity of thinking would allow them to rebuild from any starting point. Because that person is never truly starting from zero. That person always has the most important asset already in their possession. The question I'm asking makes us uncomfortable, and that's not the intention. If you were to lose tomorrow all the external indicators of your financial life, all the accounts, all the assets, all the credentials, all the titles, what would remain that is genuinely, unshakably yours? Whatever your honest answer, that is your true net worth, and that is where your most important investment should be placed.